The BRRRR strategy allows you to be very efficient with the capital that you have. You can spend the same dollar over and over and over and keep buying a house. So a typical BRRRR deal would look like, and that's the most recent book I wrote. I buy a house that's just in terrible shape. It's completely trash, and I pay $60,000. I spent $30,000 to fix it up. So I've spent $90,000 total on this house that's now worth about $120,000. The bank's going to let me borrow 75% of what it's worth. So 75% of 120 is 90,000, which is the same amount of money that I put into that deal. So I spent 90, I get back 90, but I have a house with $30,000 of equity that cash flows a couple $100 a month. I also learned everything I just learned from that rehab, about that area, about how I got the deal, about what worked and what didn't. So the next deal theoretically should be even better. And I went from buying about 2 houses a year because I would just dump, $60,000 into every single house, to 2 houses a month because I could spend that money, I could get it back, and I could send it out again. So the velocity of my money was increasing tremendously because my money was now working hard for me. Every time it went out there and got a deal and came back to me, I added $30,000 to my net worth. And if I could do that twice a month, I was adding $60,000 of money to my net worth, but it was with the same capital. I didn't have to go save capital to go invest it, right? I could just kind of recycle it back and forth. So the capital I had was working for me, earning me $60,000 a month plus a couple hundred in cash flow, while I'm still working at my job, building up more capital. So now I'm just one guy, but it's like I'm in 2 different places, if that makes sense, right? So now I'm getting twice as much results, which was very similar to what was happening in the restaurant, where I learned if I do these things and I stack them up, I can make 5 times as much as someone else in the exact same amount of time as what they're spending.
So now BRRRR is an acronym. Can you break down what each letter stands for?
Absolutely. And that's really all that it is. It's the order in which you would buy rental property. So the B is buy, and then rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So you buy a house, you rehab it, you rent it out to someone, you go to a bank and you refinance it, and then you repeat that on the next house. And the book is basically broken into those 5 parts. And my premise is, if you master BRRRR, if you master each of those 5 things, you will have mastered real estate investing. If you know how to buy really good deals, that's the most important part of real estate investing there is. If you can rehab houses, that makes deals available to you that somebody else would be too scared to take on. So there's opportunity there. If you can rent your property out, you'll have cash flow and you'll be making money every month and eventually hit financial freedom. If you can refinance it, you can get that capital back and you can keep spending it, like I was saying earlier. And then the repeat is about systems. How do you build systems so you're not doing a ton of work? So this thing becomes an easily repeatable, simplified process that almost runs on its own so that you can scale it big. And those are 5 skills that every real estate investor needs. And if you can do those things, you can be what I call a black belt investor and build some serious wealth.
It's so good. I must say that I love the His and Her Money Show, you all, because this is packed of great information. So let's say you're talking to somebody that maybe they have fear, maybe they don't know where to begin, where to start. What would you tell that beginner investor to do first? Would it be to save, a little bit of money? What would you tell them the first steps that they should take?
First step you should take doesn't even have anything to do with real estate investing. It has to do with the standard that you have for yourself, right? So my standard when I worked in that restaurant was that I know that I could be a really good basketball player. I knew that I could help my team win games, whether I was the one shooting the ball or I was the one setting the screen. I took that same mentality into the restaurant. Oh, all my tables are good. Let me go fill up everybody else's waters. Let me bring their tables bread. Let me help them bust their tables, right? So everybody around me started to really like me and they spoke well of me, which helped me get promotions with my boss where I was getting bigger tables and more tables and better hours and stuff like that. What I found is that people who are successful in life, actually, let me back that up. People that are unsuccessful in life tend to blame something outside themselves. It's a corrupt system, or other people are against them, or it's just there's no way you can get ahead. There's always a reason why.
Excuses.
Yes, there's tons of them, right? Like we don't have to look very hard to find excuses. Mm-hmm. Successful people may do that to a degree, but the biggest difference is that they just have a higher standard of themselves, right? So there's people that went to the same restaurant as me and saw me get an 8 top when they got 2 people on their table and thought, oh, it must be nice to be David, right? But they weren't going around filling everybody's waters up. They weren't trying to beat me out of that spot. They just wanted it to be handed to them. So in general, I think the road to financial freedom, which is a very worthy goal, starts with raising the standard that you put on yourself. When you show up at work every day, are you coming to win that game? Are you giving everything you have like it's game 7 of the finals and you're going to leave it on the floor? Or are you showing up and waiting for someone to just hand something to you for good things to come your way? Right? That's where I would say it starts, right? And if you're already getting the most out of yourself that you possibly can, you're gonna be saving money. You're gonna find you earn a lot more money than what you were earning, because most bosses, like now I'm a boss, I run a real estate team. I am constantly frustrated with employees that do not care as much as I do, that are not trying nearly as hard as me, but that want all my opportunity and they want what comes my way, right? I'm telling you, if you work at any kind of small business, they're looking for people to step up, take initiative, and crush it. And you will find rewards if you're doing that and you're asking for them, right? So if that's what's happening, you're going to be naturally saving money because you expect more out of yourself. Like, you will save money. You're going to be making more money, so you'll have more to save because you're outperforming all your competition. Then naturally, you're going to have a desire, what do I do with this money? That's where investing comes in, right? The first thing that you should do when you hit that point is start analyzing mock deals. So pull up a house on Zillow and say, if I bought this house, would it cash flow or not? And learn how to analyze a property. Now, BiggerPockets has calculators that do it. I've got articles on greenincome.com, a blog I run that shows how simple it is to just look at a property. Here's your 5 expenses. Here's your rent. Is your rent more than those 5 expenses? If so, it'll cash flow, right? Then learn how to determine what your down payment would be to buy that property and what your ROI on that money would be. Then you'll start to recognize good deals versus not good deals. Then take it the next step and start to say, how could I make this house worth more? Could I add a bedroom? Could I add a bathroom? Ooh, it has a sunroom. How much would it cost to turn that into something? Reach out to contractors and talk to them. Talk to other investors, right? It's pretending like you're buying that house and running through the steps that you would take before you actually have any skin in the game. And if you do that enough times, you'll start to feel confidence. And that's what most people are lacking, right? Most people don't move forward until they feel confidence. And that's very similar to saying, I'll go to the gym when I feel strong. You got to go through it to build the confidence, right? But that doesn't mean you should be risking your money. You find a way to do it with very low stakes to train, to go through the motions, right? Like the same reason we practice a sport or we practice anything that we want to do well. UFC fighters are not going full contact all day, every single day. They'd be knocked out all the time, right? They're running through drills, they're practicing on each other, and then on fight night, they're actually going at it with everything they have. But why would you wait till fight night before you start worrying about practicing? That's what people should be doing. And maybe on that analogy, for the fighters that are out there that know they have a fight in 6 months, they're giving it their best in training every day. They know this is a goal I have, I want to win, and they're working hard at it. We may not be UFC fighters, we may not be professional athletes, but nothing stops us from acting like that when we're at our job every day, or when we're in school, or when we're trying to raise our kids, or whatever it is. There's nothing that says you can't put the same effort as an Olympic athlete into whatever it is that you do, right? And I've just found that most people in life don't do it. So for those that do, man, the world's your oyster. You can have anything you want if you take that mentality and go after things.
That's good. We'll make sure we have the links that he mentioned as well to the calculators in the show notes.
Now, earlier you mentioned you gave a scenario. You was like, you'll buy a house for $60,000. That's trash, right? That needs this work. Now, what is something that would be worthy of, us putting our money in, and what are some types of rehab work that we should run the other way from?
So you always look for the low-hanging fruit you want to handle first, right? So if you can buy a house that needs cosmetic work, that's usually the best kind of work. If you have to put a brand new roof on a house, that's nice, but you're not going to get the same value out of it that you put into it. It costs you $12,000 to put on a roof, and appraiser's not going to give you $12,000 more of value. If you have to do electrical or plumbing work as a beginner, you should go the other way. You're not going to get it. If it has brand new plumbing, no buyers are going to come in and say, oh God, I'll pay $30,000 more. It's got new plumbing. No one's ever thought that, right? Buyers are looking at the backsplash and how the kitchen ties together and if it's open, right? So your ideal house needs work in those areas. The walls need to be opened up. The landscaping's in really bad shape. It needs paint and flooring. You could go in there and paint the cabinets and put on some hardware. You could update the shower, like the bathrooms could be updated, but it doesn't have a lot of dry rot. It doesn't, like on the outside, like that fungus that eats away wood. It's not going to have electrical problems at all. It's not going to have any serious plumbing issues. It's not going to have foundation issues. It's not going to have the roof. Those are probably your top 5 killers. Now, sometimes you come across a screaming deal, like you could buy it for 40 and it'll be worth 120 because it has so many of those problems. That's what they got to sell it for. And in that case, it's fine. If you got to fix up the plumbing, that's cool. But in general, you're trying to avoid those big ones, especially when you're new.
Now, what about some of those math nerds or people that are doing the math, right? They're like, okay.
Because you have a calculator in your brain.
Well, I'm just saying the scenario that you gave where you put 60 in, you fix it up for 30, and then you were able to turn around and get 75% from the value, which I think the value is like at 120. Then you turn around, you take that 90,000, you put it into the next house.
Yep.
And you do it, you keep repeating, you keep repeating. Are you leveraging yourself on all of these homes? Are you having multiple liens basically on these homes? How is that process?
I'm glad you asked that question. So the short answer is yes. You've had a mortgage or a lien on every single property that you take out on. Now, the common objection to this is that you don't want to be what they say over leveraged. You don't want to owe too much money on these houses, right? And that's a fear that, in my opinion, came from 2005 through 2009 or 8, when housing prices were like skyrocketing and people were borrowing more than they could afford, right? I don't worry at all about owing more money on a house. I don't care what I owe. I care what the payment is. So for most of these houses, when you're taking a payment out on something that like you're borrowing 90 grand, your payment's like $600 or $700 a month, right? And your rent that's coming in is like $1,000 or $1,100 a month. So right off the bat, your cash flow will protect you from losing the property. And that's what cash flow is really meant for. It's a defensive metric that keeps you from losing something, right? I don't care if my house that was worth 120 and I own 90 on it drops to being worth 60. I don't care if there's a crash. I'm actually hoping there is, because I could buy more of those houses at 60,000. What I owe on the house does not matter unless I go to sell it. So if it drops to being worth 60 grand and I owe 90 on it, I don't really care. I'm not planning on selling it. It's still going to rent out. I'm still going to have money coming in, right? I have this analogy. It's like when you're climbing a mountain and then you slip and fall, but you got that belay that's into the rock that catches you. That's what cash flow is like. Okay, so the whole market crashed and my house went from 120 down to 60, but my cash flow caught me, so I couldn't get hurt. I just wait for it to climb right back up again, and then I'm on my way moving myself up the mountain. So the 2 things that I believe keep somebody from getting in trouble with real estate is buying for cash flow and having reserves. Because you don't know, maybe the water heater goes out, or your tenant lets the bathtub overflow and you get water leaks everywhere. Stuff's going to happen. And if you have money set aside, you can weather any kind of temporary, like, oh crap moment that you may have. But over the long run, you're going to get so much wealth created from the property going up in value and the loan getting paid down that I just make sure I have cash reserves and cash flow. And that gives me the confidence to be more aggressive when I'm pursuing real estate, because we're always going to have fear. There's never going to come a time where you feel strong before you go to the gym, right? Mm-hmm. The only time that happens is if you're taking a drug like cocaine or methamphetamine or something, right? That's where you can cheat the system and feel strong, but you're going to pay a price for that later. So we don't recommend it, right? Don't go to any human being that makes you feel confident in what you're doing. Like, just gets your emotions roused up. Those are usually the gurus that are trying to rip you off. They're trying to get you to give them $80,000 so that you don't feel afraid. It's okay to feel fear. Right? You conquer fear by putting money aside, by conquering your own, like disciplining yourself so that you're living within your means and you're doing well. And you know, if I slip, if I fall, if I have a hiccup, I've got money set aside to catch me. I will learn from that and I will keep going.